Innovative and dramatic, these comics are filled with epic quests, travel between worlds, and all the monsters and adventure you could ever hope for. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 fantasy webcomics. Before we begin, we publish new videos every day, so be sure to subscribe for more great content. For this list, we're looking at webcomics with not only a fantasy setting, but ones that contain themes and tropes associated with fantasy genres, such as supernatural creatures, magic, etc. We're also looking at series whose fantasy setting is central to the story and vision of the comic, and not comedy webcomics set in fantasy universes, as that's a different list entirely. Number 10, Last Blood. Bobby Crosby, Chris Crosby, and Owen Gianni. In this over-the-top adventure, the only thing that stands between us and the zombie apocalypse are a bunch of bloodthirsty vampires. Of course, the vampires' reason for preserving the human race might not exactly be noble. Since they need human blood to survive, the extinction of humanity would mean their extinction as well. The comic follows a group of surviving humans and their vampiric allies, as the zombie hordes pick off the last remnants of the human race. The series also gives a new interesting origin for zombies, and connects their origins to vampires, with the first zombie created by a vampire starved of blood for over 60 years and driven to madness. Number 9, A Red Tail's Dream, Mina Sundberg. The surreal and dreamlike setting of this comic and its beautifully rendered art harmonize perfectly with its mythological setting. Written in creator Mina Sundberg's native Finnish and English, the story draws from Nordic legends. We follow a boy, Hanu, and his dog who are trapped in a dream world by a fox spirit, who decides to blow off his duty of managing the Northern Lights. Hanu, who begins the story as a reluctant hero, must usher the inhabitants of a village trapped in the dream world back to the mortal world, while dealing with the mischievous fox and a number of other spirits. Number 8, Order of Tales, Evan Dom. Tales acts as the backbone and much of the mythological history of the Overside universe, which features a number of other popular webcomics in a bizarre and uniquely fantasy world. Ignoring many of the fantasy genre's tropes, the series does not feature the usual cast of dwarves, elves, or even humans, instead featuring original creatures and a world for them to inhabit. Taking place hundreds of years before many of the other stories of the Otherside universe, we follow Quark, last teller of the Order of Tales, 15 years after the destruction of his hometown. Following the instructions of his deceased father, Quark sets off on an epic quest to discover lost history. Number 7, Paranatural, Zach Morrison. This coming-of-age tale features a group of middle schoolers with superpowers going up against paranormal forces. When the new kid in school, Maxwell Puckett, discovers that he is one of the few who can see the supernatural all around him, he joins the Paranatural Activity Club. Max and the other members of the club possess spectral abilities that help them go up against their supernatural foes. Much of the humor here is drawn from Max's self-deprecation and the comic's clever wordplay, and it has been aptly described as Ghostbusters meets X-Men, except everyone is 12. Number 6, The Phoenix Requiem, Sarah Ellerton. Although Phoenix Requiem takes most of its inspiration from Victorian romance, it breathes new life into the genre by combining it with elements of fantasy and mystery. The story begins after a young man, Jonas Fallner, is found unconscious in the woods near the small town of Esk. He is nursed back to health by a doctor-in-training, Anya Katsukova, who develops a budding friendship with him. Anya's skepticism is put to the test when a supernatural plague sweeps into town not long after Jonas's arrival. Along with ex-soldier Robin Hart, who possesses an ability to see spirits, they must unravel the many mysteries surrounding the town and their pasts. Number 5, Emily Carroll's short stories, Emily Carroll. With a visual style inspired by 19th century Japanese woodblock prints, Emily Carroll's art is unique and hauntingly beautiful. However, it isn't just the artwork that makes her short comics so memorable. The stories, often described as modern fairy tales, are filled with horror, fantasy, love, and bizarre characters. Each strip tells its own bizarre and beautiful story, often with an unconventional storytelling style. Carroll's prolific webcomics are unsurprisingly some of the most critically recognized of the last few years, taking in a number of honors, including multiple Eisner Awards, the most prestigious award in the comic book industry. Number 4, Freak Angels, Warren Ellis. Unlike many of the artists on this list, Ellis was already a prolific comic book artist when he announced his innovative project Freak Angels. Set in a post-apocalyptic steampunk world, the strip followed a group of superpowered survivors of a global flood 6 years earlier. These survivors, known as Freak Angels, come up against a number of difficult struggles and moral decisions. Much of the comic centers around the 23-year-old protagonist's decisions on how to use their extraordinary powers, with some acting selflessly and others acting as selfish as you can get. And those of power and responsibility are constants in this epic webcomic that was eventually picked up and published by Avatar Press as a graphic novel. Number 3, Drow Tales, Moonless Age, Jan Gagne. Initially devised as a fan fiction comic set in the Dungeons & Dragons universe, creator Yann Gagné rewrote early versions of the comic to transform it into an original feature with its own lore. That comic's lore has increased exponentially over the years, and it's become the central comic in the Drow Tales webcomic universe, which features a number of comics that explore the backstories and characters featured in Moonless Age. Of course, the deep and rich mythology isn't the only thing to love about this webcomic, as it features a number of intriguing characters, stunning artwork, and a complex story that continually keeps its readers coming back for more. Number 2. High Moon, David Gallagher and Steve Ellis. When DC launched their webcomic imprint, Zuda, in 2007, they turned to someone well-versed in dark fantasy to bring a series that had been developing for 3 years to fruition. The comic combined the supernatural fantasy and western genres by featuring a Pinkerton-turned-bounty hunter, Matthew McGregor, going up against werewolves in the Old West. If the premise of a cowboy hunting down werewolves isn't cool enough on its own, the comic features a number of memorable and complex characters and ideas, and a sepia-tone art style that melds perfectly with its setting. Before we unveil our top pick, here are a few honorable mentions. Number 1. Ava's Demon, Michelle Zakowski. Interning at Pixar and later landing a job at DreamWorks, Zakowski's experience and skills as a professional animator comes across in her beautiful webcomic, typically featuring stunning artwork mixed with animated panels. Conceived when she was only 13 years old, as a way to creatively cope with her depression, Zakowski spent the next 8 years developing the story. As its name implies, the actual story follows the teenage Ava and her possession by a trickster demon that makes life difficult for her. Set in a futuristic, faraway galaxy, the story blends multiple elements of science fiction and fantasy into a beautiful and often haunting space opera. Do you agree with our picks? Check out these other great clips from WatchMojo and subscribe for new videos every day.